We will always be trained, among other things, through something that is omnipresent under the law of karma, which is fluctuation. Everything that regular and fluctuating is omnipresent under the law of karma. But we have to learn, throughout the evolutionary process, to work with each level of fluctuation, logically depending on the scope our consciousness is reaching and the scope we have to reach. If, in terms of transcendence, we reach certain levels and other levels of fluctuation, we must not give up, because if we wait for confirmation that everything is going well, because there is no more fluctuation, we are deceiving ourselves, because fluctuation is omnipresent. The consciousness and the cosmos, a path to one's inner cosmos, in assistance for a more profound understanding for the current planetary transition.
A stimuli that accompanies the pilgrim in his return to his cosmic home, the consciousness and the cosmos. Podcast of Uksim Planetary Service Centre.
Welcome back, dear listeners. My name is Arwenak, and with Thomas, we're excited to introduce the topic of today's podcast.
Throughout our history, Noah's Ark has been a popular topic of conversation. Today, we will explore the new Cosmosophy teachings offered by Daniel Gagliardo, the instructor of Cosmosophy Uksim, as he shared in one of his talks.
Then we will find out what is the archetype of present-day humanity. So, Thomas, let's start with the question, what does Noah's Ark represent? Is it a symbol of the rescue?
Yes, this is what underlies humanity's awareness of the cyclical assistance it has received each time stages or cycles had to be closed and humanity had to embark on, let us say, a new journey, a new situation. And the Cosmos, podcast of Uksim Planetary Service Centre. Then, Noah's Ark represents each and every journey of the Noahs that ever existed, because now the rescue is also in charge of Noah, because Noah comes to represent the hierarchy acting on behalf of the law, so that the law is complied with.
Daniel Gagliardo continues, the animals, everything that appeared in Noah's Ark, is the spectrum of rescue in general. This means that not only were human beings going to be rescued, it is the same as today. Not only a certain number of human beings on the surface of the planet, but rescue involves all kingdoms, in ways that we cannot evaluate, but the hierarchies handles perfectly. So, there have always been Noahs, so to speak, because humanity has never been able to reach a point on its own of closing a protocol, a ceremony related to an evolutionary cycle, and embarking on another without assistance.
Daniel continues, we sometimes comment that even the monadas of beings who are currently rescuable do not have the capacity to respond to the cosmic mandate and move on without the hierarchy rescuing them. We are talking about rescuable monadas, meaning monadas that, despite having the capacity to respond to the evolutionary plan need the hierarchy to operate magnetic fields to bring them together in monadic set of groups and be taken or prepared for their immediate cosmic destiny, whether it be to return to the Earth's surface or go to extraterrestrial or intraterrestrial destinations more advanced than their current destination or current experience on Earth.
If the rescuable ones cannot move by themselves to the fields where they are expected, somehow the fields that are being offered to them to fulfill their cosmic destiny, right? So the Noahs were always indispensable, not only in karmic universes, but Noahs have always acted to rescue consciousness, because Noah is a hierarchical movement that strengthens, confirms, concretizes, or somehow ensures that circulatory order. Then, when stage is closing and another is opening, consciousnesses have to experience, depending on what we understand by large scale, right? Because for the Atlanteans, for example, it was not a small scale that Atlantis was flying through the air. They did not have time to think about what was happening in another parts of the planet. For them, it was a universal collapse. Yes, of their universe, the Atlantean universe, the same for the Lemurians.
Daniel continues, the difference is that the magnitude that is offered today in terms of purification is something that greatly exceeds what was experienced by the Lemurians and Atlanteans, for whom those purifications were territorial, but we insist that they saw them as totally universal. They did not even have time to check what was happening around the corner. In the Lemurian era, the civilization was Lemurian. In the Atlantean era, it was Atlantean, just as today it is post-Atlantean, except that the central activity for each race was located in certain places. The rest was a radiating principle known as colonies that depended on the main country. So both Atlantis and Lemuria had central islands that had a number of increasingly diffused island groups around them, and the main activity of those civilizations took place there, which does not mean that in other distant places there were no colonies with the degree of influence and dependence. That is why one of the specific illusions that archaeologists, paleontologists, and geologists have always experienced with regard to the remains they found in certain places is to believe that they are primitive humans. Most of these are colonizers far from their motherland who, once they cut the link and no longer receive direct influence, command, supplies, raw materials, and the added value of what they did on the central islands of each of these civilizations.
So, continues Daniel Gagliardo, more than an observation of primitive men, it is related to karmic lines of Atlantean colonists fundamentally isolated and no longer receiving the contributions they used to receive. The dependence they had on the mother country ended up in a state of karmic regression. Let's imagine ourselves here depend on the entire distribution engine, and suddenly we have nothing, absolutely nothing. We find ourselves having to eat, I don't know, something that it's not exactly the food we used to eat, unable even to grow a vegetable garden because we need to continue functioning in order to pump water and irrigate. This means that overnight, in a blink of an eye, we would be left in a state of primitivism and a state of tremendous defenselessness. Those who could survive adequately would be those who did not depend exclusively on the illusion of the material things to feel secure enough to carry on. And we can already see that this is a small handful of people on the planet. So, the same thing happened in Atlantis and Lemuria. What is the archetype of the present humanity today?
Daniel continues, the archetype of our current humanity was, among other things, to serve as a guide to the inner life of the infrahuman kingdoms, with which it shares planetary reality, and to achieve sufficiently deep, lucid and conscious contact with the inner humanities of the planet and with some extraplanetary humanities. Nothing came of that. That was the fundamental point at which we failed. We were unable to truly be a beacon, an icon, a light for the infrahuman realms. We were unable to connect with the cosmos. We encapsulated ourselves in three-dimensional, superficial reality, and we were also unable to connect with the inner civilizations that were always stimulating our receptive capacity to begin to perceive them as part of the field of planetary consciousness with which we had to interact. Basically, that is the human archetype that we did not achieve.
When we said, continues Daniel Gagliardo, that humanity could not comply with this archetypal progress or with these various aspects that made up or make up the archetype, we included this question of having to reflect the activity of the inner groups at the level of the egos and personalities. Humanity's evolutionary have to go to synthesis. What does that mean? It means that each of the nuclei of consciousness to make up an individual, which in turn make up humanity, have to maintain an interrelationship in a flow of energies. The energies must not remain stagnated.
evolutionary group work or egos gathered in the name of the higher self in matter allows a flow of energy to go from the inner level to the level closest to the most specific depth of material consciousness, and for the energy to return. We did not do that. The only way to overcome this is to try, as egos in matter, to do the same work and a mirror image of the work that souls do at their own levels. That is where it is said, as above, so below. So, when we understand that our souls work together, that so below is our responsibility. We say today that it is our responsibility to make the lower like the higher. And if above, in the higher, consciousnesses work in communion and in a group. So the lower should reflect a degree of communion and work in that way.
In what case does the law of mercy act? For mercy or grace to act, we have to treat the situation deeply, seeking to offer that inequality to the situation. Because if we do not offer inequality, what we will do is confirm the psychophysical state of the forces that compose it. We always say that a situation has two fundamental poles, forces or energies of liberation. If there is no silence and stillness, the energies of liberation cannot act. Now, even if we bring all our silence and stillness, it may be that the energies of liberation do not act in accordance with everything we bring, even though everything we have brought has been everything. If what we put in, what we did was not enough, the energies of liberation put in the rest. They give the rest. They complement the situation. This is mercy. That is grace. Because the energies of liberation come from our inner cause. Mercy comes from the inner cause, whether from the monada itself or from the hierarchies that act through the monada or the soul itself. So that is the meaning of the phrase. But sometimes I connect a little with the silence and then I fall into fluctuation. But the fluctuation is different. It's like I'm more receptive. I don't know how to say it. Like I'm predisposed to it.
Absolutely. The fluctuations are also gradual. Of course, that's called evolution. It means having the guarantee that as long as the being persists in a particular attitude that confirms the evolutionary order, he will continue to advance, and that even the fluctuations occur at more advanced level. It's not the same to fluctuate at one level as it is to fluctuate up here. Fluctuation in a karmic universe is guaranteed, because it is what will test us all, from those at the base of the pyramid to those at the top. But fluctuation will always have to be faced.
Sometimes it is a sign that everything is wrong because there are moments when the being is supported and offered the opportunity to overcome certain level of fluctuation. And if at the moment when you are being stimulated to experience overcoming a certain level of fluctuation, you misuse your free will, you can densify the descending order of the fluctuation. Fluctuation has a descending order and an ascending order. We will always be trained, among other things, through something that is omnipresent under the law of karma, which is fluctuation. Everything that regular and fluctuating is omnipresent under the law of karma. But we have to learn, throughout the evolutionary process, to work with each level of fluctuation, logically depending on the scope our consciousness is reaching and the scope we have to reach. If, in terms of transcendence, we reach certain levels and other levels of fluctuation, we must not give up, because if we wait for confirmation that everything is going well, because there is no more fluctuation, we are deceiving ourselves, because fluctuation is omnipresent.
I didn't understand. I thought fluctuation was a sign that everything was wrong. Let's see further what Daniel says.
Sometimes it is a sign that everything is wrong, because there are moments when the being is supported and offered the opportunity to overcome certain level of fluctuation. And if at the moment when you are being stimulated to experience overcoming a certain level of fluctuation, you misuse your free will, you can densify the descending order of the fluctuation. Fluctuation has a descending order and ascending.
At the moment when you are fluctuating, you are also being stimulated to make proper use of free will to see how you accompany that continuous wave of fluctuation. When you are up on the wave, you have to see how you accompany being up, and when you are down, how to be down, and when you are at the intermediate level as well. But fluctuation is inevitable. So we must not allow ourselves to go into a collapse because we fluctuate, because it means that we are alive and we are incarnated. Because when the ego dissolved the bodies, it is not fluctuating.
It is one of the few moments of stability when it is close to the core of the soul. It transcended the astral levels and dimensions, the mental level. There the ego knows the greatest possible instance of stability for it. But in matter, we fluctuate continuously. If, for example, when I am in this state of fluctuation, I say, well, I'm going to seek silence and stillness because all this noise I have is not reality.
It is reality, the reality that you have to learn to transcend. Let's see, everything we experience is real. Everything, even people who say it wasn't a dream and it's real. Isn't a dream real? Everything we experience is real. Only we can add aspects to reality that make it denser, more unreal. It is called more unreal when we add a necessary illusion to the illusion programmed evolutionary by inner life and by the law of karma. There is a necessary illusion that we can call an illusion that does not really have a strict character of reality in the form of necessity, but which we apply. The misuse of free will can add aspects of reality to situations, that is, illusion that could be omitted. But everything is real, even the compulsive flows of illusions that we sometimes generate, that what we could call unnecessary margins of unreality are still real.
Podcast offered by the Uksim Planetary Service Centre. This enriched edition of the Consciousness and the Cosmos showcases a collection of insightful recordings featuring the teachings of Daniel Gagliardo, the visionary instructor and founder of Uksim, captured during vibrant Cosmosophy gatherings held across Europe and the serene landscapes of Uksim, Argentina. This current planetary instruction, offered by Daniel Gagliardo, take the listeners into a realm of deep understanding and cosmic exploration.
Captured during vibrant Cosmosophy gatherings held across Europe and the serene landscapes of Uksim, Argentina. These current planetary instructions offered by Daniel Gagliardo take the listeners into a realm of deep understanding and cosmic exploration.
Dear listeners, thank you for being with us.